Breaking news. I don't even want to do this episode, you guys. This is so brutal and harsh, but also, we cannot not look at this. This most recent, sort of mind-numbingly ridiculous example of not just a few bad apples, but a systemic problem, not just here, but in many places, not just where it happened, but all over the country and in its own various ways all over the world, just hit the news cycle and the national and world psyche, alongside all the other madness going on in the world that we talk about on the show, right? And that the world acknowledges, for known and unreported on. But specifically in terms of the turmoil and the public transformative, changing self-inquiry of a nation as a whole. If there is such a thing. We go through that, right, as a collective. And we witness that in our neighbors as collectives, kind of, right? We are simultaneously individuals and a species-wide collective phenomenon, no matter how you slice it. And this most sort of gut-wrenching, powerfully tragic thing, and I just realized I left the actual TV on with the news running. I wasn't sure when I was going to go live on the air, and I realized that I kind of set myself up to be ready to go live on the air, and hadn't really quite meant to yet. And I left my hot tea somewhere. My throat's going to be really annoyed. Sorry. This is not easy to talk about. What just happened can't be set aside, can't be, what about ismed. It's not happening in my backyard. The deadly cousin to NIMBYism. Don't let that happen in my backyard. And it needs to be looked at. It needs to be, a mirror needs to be held up at every place, at every level, at every, by every person who says, this is too much, this is not acceptable, this cannot continue to happen. And anyone who's sort of downplayed it, swept it under the rug, dismissed it, pretended it wasn't a big deal, tried to minimize it, tried to negotiate it away, tried to reverse psychology, vilify, accuse it of being some sort of Marxist lie, destroy the country shenanigans. It's no. People are killing each other. And it's kind of, not. It goes all ways. There's all the arguments get whittled down to this. Why does it keep happening? And why do the people who, how do we change this? And first and foremost, it's by looking at it in the face and acknowledging that there's a line, right? And to cross it, to go beyond that contour, that boundary that is theoretically agreed upon, and isn't controversial, and that's that no one deserves to be assaulted, let alone murdered by law enforcement, unless, of course, you're literally out of a scene from a movie trying to stop an actual bad guy trying to actually do something horrible. But just because you're pulling someone over and you're in a bad mood and having a bad day, want to exercise your free will right to abuse your power and murder someone and not suffer consequences, which seems to be the sociopathy or craziness or whatever the right label is, because labels don't matter anymore. There's some sort of disease in the world, and from Cain and Abel to today, with the 2 year late, I think it's 2 years, year and a half, 2 year late cover up, denial, and final sort of like, oh, here's the footage, never mind. All the things they said was just nonsense because basically they lynched him and wanted to get away with it and then couldn't. And that's not right. And I don't want to sound like I'm part of that other echo chamber, but if there's one thing that's actually factually true, is that there's a handful of political crazy people out there trying to whitewash it away. And I'm not saying that just because a lot of other people are saying that. I'm saying that because those people actually really are trying to do that, and that's grotesque and wrong. Especially not when it's obvious that there is a depth to this that goes beyond what's reasonable, and we must deal with it and do something about it beyond what we've done hitherto and up until now. Something that actually renders justice and safety and protection, etc., and a world in which everyone feels like they've been protected and served, and not like they've been hunted down and lynched and murdered and abused. And it isn't exclusively one group or another, but all of it. The gambit, my argument here, folks, if I may be so bold, and I don't know, people might get pissed off at me for interjecting it or connecting issues, but the gambit of self-destructive, mutual destruction, craziness going on in the world, it's evidence of a deep-seated need to do something more than legislate, more than hold. I mean, obviously, yes, try and hold accountable and create legal boundaries around which we try to prevent things. Prevention is valuable, but also healing. There's a sickness, and we need to attend to it. I don't know if I've got anything else in me to say except a moment of silence, please, if you may indulge that, for Ronald Greene and everyone in the history of mankind that has ever been struck down by anybody else. And I know that, the political football of, well, Cain and Abel, was it Abel and Cain? I've seen and heard all the angles. The point is, it's got to change. This is intolerable. It's a madness, and it doesn't have to be this way. And people deserve better, because no one deserves to be, no matter how you slice it, no one deserves to be murdered for reasons that make zero sense at any point in time. And I don't have words today. But this footage from the body cam of these officers came out, and it's one of those things where, it's been generally sort of suppressed since his mysterious death. And one of too many other people, and just one out of millions of people that have, shuffled off the mortal coil, to borrow from Shakespeare, in their interim time. But People who minimize and deny that there's a problem need to see this particular set of video because it's undeniable what's going on. And the sickness that is hate, rage, violence, porn-induced fucking abuse of power, corruption with a little bit of what's obviously racism. And that you can't, people need to stop saying racism doesn't exist. And people need to stop saying that systematic racism in law enforcement isn't a problem. Because it is, period. Doesn't matter how you slice it, doesn't matter how you try to spin it. And it cuts all the ways because there's all kinds of angry people out there trying to do all kinds of horrible things to everybody. But also, we need to confront what things are and attend to the deeper issue of, like, truly, like, what needs to be healed and how do we do that? And I mean those questions profoundly, and I invoke a moment of silence for this and the infinity and perpetuity of people who might still be victims of other kinds of abuse of power, gun violence, and destruction and mayhem. Amen. Thank you for enduring that prolonged moment of silence, and I hope that didn't seem self-indulgent or crazy. It was serious and legit, and I meant it, and I meant what I said. And I'm one of those crazy people, and you'll forgive me for wanting to, like, put in the last word in my own episode, on my own podcast about something that happened in the world. But Monday's episode of Midnight, or of Late Night Thoughts, was bad enough, right? Like, the world is at that place. A little bit of entertainment. I think I was right. Then again, it wasn't really me. Michael Cohen called this forever ago, and it was sort of like the obvious thing. If you're looking for the thing that's going to go down in history, some things kind of stick out. And the accountant at the center of all the corruption flipping eventually. So comedy, here's a little bit of comic relief. As far as I'm concerned, the counterpoint to all this mayhem and annihilation and American carnage and global carnage, right? The full spectrum from people killing each other in the streets in America to people lobbing bombs at each other in other countries. Michael Cohen said something funny that should make us all giggle. Donald Trump is probably going to try to flip on everybody else. And deep down, you all know that's true. That's 100% Donald Trump. The moment these 3 investigations drop actual hammers on him, I don't know. That's the best. Right now, that's it. There's a meme I made a really long time ago, and this is just like an an end to the show. And because that was a little splash of Trump-topian, like, isn't that great that politics went there and we're still dealing with it? Also, can cops just stop killing people in the streets? Dear world, can we all just stop killing each other? I don't remember who made that meme. Sometimes, I think in my worst nightmares of like, I'm having a nightmare and it's a lucid dream and I'm some sort of like failed superhero, which has always been, I don't know if you all have recurring nightmares, and this is very strange, but my recurring nightmare has always been like, I'm a failed superhero and I'm about to like do something worse than whatever, regretful superhero thing is your thing that you've seen in superhero content. I have nightmares like that. Stupid. We literally just had to live through a person being in office that helped leverage the normalization of all kinds of just letting anger roil into violent action. And genuinely and authentically, as we cope with what's happened, the visceral impact of seeing what happened 2 years ago in the case of Ronald Green, for which everyone should be, in my humble opinion, taking up some sort of, justice for Ronald Green sign. Make your own, borrow the ones that, people have already made. I made one. Everyone should make one. It's not that hard. Get a thing. You have free apps in your phone for making things. Make one. For crying out loud. Share the one, share all the ones that everyone's already made too, because this is ridiculous and wrong and just dead wrong. And anybody and everybody that is trying to peddle the line that it's really not that big of a problem must be forced to sit in a room and watch this footage. I think this kind of like 100, all of it. We haven't even seen all of it, like from beginning to end. What other crazy nonsense things that these officers say? Can they get the audio for the missing chunk where for some reason there's just no audio? And acknowledge that by choosing to downplay it, minimize it, whataboutism it, pretend that it's not happening, by literally, to quote Donald Trump, by saying things like, well, I'm the least racist person in the room. That means you're still a little bit racist, you numbnuts. And that we just got to acknowledge it's a problem, because as an outside observer who's been sort of like, ooh, no one knows who I am, what I am, where I come from, no one cares. People let it all hang out in awkward ways, in the worst possible moments. And as someone who's lived in this country long enough, legally, perfectly legally, speaking English even better than I currently do as part of the podcast, because at one point I was, studying and participating in my elocution exercises from theater, Hogwarts, the Hogwarts of theater schools. And let me tell you, the hardest pill to swallow is that there are more people full of rage and hate and violence in their hearts and some sort of hypocrisy driving them and some sort of deep, deep spiritual problem and disease like white supremacy or racism or just plain old live by the gun, shoot 'em all, let God decide brainwashing than anyone cares to admit. And that's why shit like this happens. And why it seems to be happening more and more. Because it isn't an accident there's people out there thinking like that. It's always been part of the culture. And it's something that's lived in the dirty corners of lots of people's lives. And that on the surface, and for a lot of people who've never had to deal with it directly, you can talk yourself into thinking it's not that big of a deal. And so you suck yourself into trying to be part of the solution by making it. But it's like, since Cain killed Abel, we have been mad at each other for reasons that don't make sense, up to and including this crazy label we call race. And I don't mean to minimize any of the arguments about that. And I do want to put a stop to some bullshit right now. If you read, and I have links to the PDFs, I'm going to do this on my Facebook, either today or tomorrow, or maybe Monday. I don't know. It's all been a lot this week, and it's already Thursday, May 20th, 5:01 p.m. Thanks for tuning into this show. If you read, and I'm just stalling because I can't remember the good doctor's name, but if you read Dr. insert her name here later when I edit the show and updraft it, who co-authored the actual living, breathing doctor of, I forget what science, some sort of social sciences studies, social studies. It's a real thing, and conspiracy theory can go bugger off. If you read the PDF and you listen to the actual interviews that this doctor has given about critical race theory, every single claim being made by GOP politicians and right-wing talking head media outlet puppets on screen has been debunked. Clearly, categorically, they're just whole cloth lying to you in the way of all the ways that some of us have been trying to warn you. Lyndon B. Johnson said, if you make the poorest white man hate the poorest black man, you'll be able to steal from him forever, however the quote goes. Even if you don't do a race war, like all the memes with the stick figures poking you, prodding you, America, do a race war, joke about, they're already doing it to you. And violence is this desired result of these meat grinder, psychological, toxic, crazy-making, facets that are clearly visible in our world around us. And we can change them, right? Because it's not about how impossible it is to put a stop to it and to change it. It's about how it's time. No more pussyfooting and hemming and hawing and whataboutisming and enabling. Like, it's just, hey, this is ridiculous. And it's not, especially because, I'm sorry. I can't buy into any of the rationalizations spewed, especially if you pretend to be a follower of Jesus. And, geez Louise, look at all the times that followers of Jesus have gotten whipped up into a frenzy and done something stupid and murdered a bunch of people. Can we stop that, please? Because I'm fairly certain Jesus said, don't murder people anymore, especially if you want to, solve all the other problems by achieving the opening of the third eye stuff. I don't know. Call me crazy. But please, 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 if you're listening to this show, take a moment. If you haven't heard the name Ronald Green because you've been busy and you heard it once 2 years ago because of mysterious circumstances, or if you're already I've seen the video and it's exhausting and my mind wants to break, pause. Take another deep breath and a moment of silence to honor everyone from Cain or Abel. Well, Cain eventually died too, right? Just honor everybody that's ever been butchered and pray as, I'm really calling out to people who believe in Jesus, man. Pray like Jesus did on the cross for forgiveness, for everyone's forgiveness. And as crazy as it sounds, for the idiots doing all the horrible mayheming and butchering. but also for like the healing, right? Pray and meditate for the healing of the species, because somewhere it's some deep space, some deep place that we all have access to, and that we all are afraid of or neglect, or we're told is evil and bad, but or don't understand or don't realize is there, but that we all have access to this communal, collective, spiritual network, as I like to shorthand it, where collective healing can and should and I think is supposed to be done. And even if we don't know if we know what we're doing, I think we can help, right? As one little Zen saying says, may this facilitate all beings.